The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to episode 24 of DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery After Party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me at the turntable is not my regular co-host, the one and only Santa Goran Jeff Hewlett, but my co-pilot, my favorite comic book guy, and the guy I can count on to fill in for me when I'm off on away missions, one of our Politirex hosts, Shashank Avvaru. Hi, Shashank. Welcome.
Namaste, Homo sapiens. I was on the last episode, and I'm on this episode of DiscoTrek. So look out, Jeff. I'm coming for your post, man.
I was just gonna say, look out, Jeff. Jeff will be back soon. And I think the three of us will kind of take the reins and go forward with these short treks of DiscoTrek. But in the meantime, we also have another guest joining us tonight, and that is the infamous, beloved Ali Martinez, who is the 23-year-old Trekkie. If you don't know her on Twitter, you should know her on Twitter because I don't know what's wrong with you. Welcome, Ali. We're so excited to have you here for your first podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yay! Well, this is a very woman-powered short trek, so we definitely needed as many women as possible.
That's exactly why I'm here.
Absolutely.
So we're super, super grateful to have you here. So obviously, cat's out of the bag. Excuse me, we're here to do our recap of the first Star Trek Discovery short trek called Runaway, which features Ensign Sylvia Tilly. She is no longer a cadet. Good stuff. So we'll be talking about our reactions and what we thought of the first short trek here in just a second. Super quickly, I wanted to fill everyone in, if you're not familiar with our podcast, how DiscoTrek works. Right now, I'll be really honest. We had not planned to review the short treks just because personally, Jeff and I have a lot on our plates. However, what I was so sorely missing in my life was more Star Trek. So once I was able to watch Runaway, I was like, there's no way I can keep quiet about this short trek, especially. I had reached out to Shashank to help us out, and so that's why Shashank and I are here tonight. So moving forward, it will likely be myself and Shashank, and or myself, Jeff, and Shashank. And then I'm not totally sure what we're going to do about guests for these short treks. So stay tuned. Right now, we're still doing our character deep dives in the meantime. And to join one of those episodes, you can go to the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. There's a post. Just search for DiscoTrek and or Ash Tyler, who's our deep dive for this month. And just comment on that episode to be entered. We're doing the drawings usually every Saturday after that. So by the time this episode comes out, it may be too late, but we're still doing deep dives on, Hugh Culber and then Michael Burnham. And that will close out our deep dives. And we're still going to focus on these short treks. So just stay tuned and we'll get our act together, I promise. And you can totally blame me for all of that. But we're here to talk about Runaway tonight. And I know for me, being a woman, I am absolutely thrilled with this first little 15-minute dive into Star Trek Extras. So let's just go ahead and get started with our first reactions to this short trek mini-sode. Ali, what did you think about this episode?
Yeah, I actually really liked it. I wasn't sure right away about the 15-minute formats when they announced the short treks because I wasn't sure if it was going to be enough time to have like a complete story, but I was definitely wrong. I really enjoyed it. I thought, obviously I love Tilly, and I thought that they pulled it together very well, and obviously a lot of woman power in the episode.
Which we will deep dive into here in a moment for sure. Shashank, what did you think about this little 15-minute exploration into Tilly's character and meeting our new character?
I'm going to do something that has never been done before on a podcast. I'm going to be a man who talks about women. Now, I don't think anything I'll say about the woman aspect of it will be even close to how elegant and graceful the two of you will talk about it in. But I will tell you, as a story, it's wonderful to see how far Tilly has come. She went from someone who was even terrified of having a roommate to now bravely and just fiercely helping a complete stranger who's in the middle of the biggest crisis of her young life. So that was the first reaction I had to the whole thing. And I know we'll get into a deep dive, but just great story, very, very powerful. And I'm loving Tilly more and more every day.
I'm super excited to hear this. To be quite honest, obviously listeners will realize we're a little bit late in recording this, and again, it's kind of a combination of my own issues, life issues and whatnot, and getting around to doing it. I Our listeners kind of know what I've been through in the past year personally, and I'm dealing with some mental health and emotional health issues that honestly have made it difficult for me to even get excited about Discovery. What? Like, is that a real thing? Yes. However, I was able to watch this, and man, like, Star Trek is what I'm just missing in my life. So when I start to get really depressed and anxious, I need to just remind myself to sit down and watch some Star Trek. Um, but especially this episode, I had no expectations. 15 minutes is not a lot of time to tell a Star Trek story. All I knew was that it featured Tilly, just like all I know is the next episode will feature a brand new character, Calypso, and then we have a Saru episode, we have a Harry Mudd episode. I know nothing beyond that. I hadn't looked at who was writing it. Any rumors on plot? I don't think we had anything to go on. So this was pretty much a blank slate for all of us going into this short trek. It's something that Star Trek has never done before. And on the heels of that, I was extremely elated to find that this episode is something that Star Trek has not done before, and having two women characters, one of those women being a person of color. This episode was entirely featured on their connection, their relationship. Uh, if you've listened to previous episodes of DiscoTrek, you've probably heard me mention the Bechdel-Wallace test before. So the Bechdel-Wallace test is basically where you have a medium where you have two women characters not talking about men. So it's not a Beverly Deanna TNG episode where they're talking about Riker or some other, or Odon or some other love interest, or even men in general. It's just two women connecting, not mentioning men at all. And for the first time in Star Trek history, we have an episode that's doing exactly that. And to be quite honest, I don't care if it's only 15 minutes. That was a pretty awesome thing. It's something that is so exciting, and to be quite honest, it's part of why I loved this little 15-minute short trek so much, is that, look, I've had time, being that the episode's been out for a little while now, I've had time to listen to other podcasts, to look at social media and see feedback from other viewers, and I'm really quite shocked at how many people were disappointed or negative about this episode. And part of it, like, to be fair, I've seen criticism. Okay, so I've seen mostly criticism from men. I've seen men who enjoy and support this episode, just like you, Shashank, and then most of the women who've given me feedback really enjoyed it. So I'm a little. I wonder, like, do you need to be a woman to truly recognize and appreciate what's happening in this episode? Is there something, because it's focused on women, that men aren't just getting? Because a lot of the negative feedback that I hear is stuff that's like, oh, they didn't close this loop. They didn't do this here. This technically wouldn't have worked. And it's not so much about what happened between the characters as it is stuff surrounding that. But the relationship between these two women is what stuck out to me the most. And so I didn't even notice the other stuff. Like, I was basically almost crying by the end of it. I don't know, Allie, how did you feel? Like, did you connect with this as a woman? Did it resonate with you that way, or was it something else?
Yeah, I think I agree with you in the fact that regardless of everything else that was going on in the episode, I really focused on the relationship between Poe and Tilly. And I also think I have also seen the reactions of people on Twitter and other social media, whether it's wonderful and some are very lukewarm about it. I know that people have mentioned that they feel like the story has been told before. And honestly, I think Tilly is a completely new character in Discovery. I mean, she is brilliant. Her enthusiasm is infectious. And, she really comes to balance out everything else in Discovery. So I really think that it hadn't been done before, and that the unfolding of the beautifully written character, which is Poe, is kind of in tandem with Tilly herself. They really balance out each other and come to realize that they have more in common than they originally thought that they did.
And that's what I really appreciated is at the end of the day, this is a story about two women that are strangers that come together. And what really pulled at my heartstrings was the very end of this episode where they have the exchange and Tilly basically says like you're going to make or Poe says you're going to make a great captain someday. And then I think I didn't write down the specific quote, but Poe's talking about her planet and it being beautiful until he's like, well, I know because you're also beautiful. And it's like, this isn't something that we really see in Star Trek a lot. Um, uh, and it almost begs me to wonder, like, is Star Trek Discovery almost the best representation of women in Star Trek? I don't know.
Well,
yeah,
well,
go for
before
it.
we get too ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
I would like to say on behalf of the male gender
Yes.
that I'm really offended that this episode does not have any men. And the society keeps saying
men walking into the cafeteria.
Society keeps saying men's rights are disappearing. This is what they're talking about. Is that they keep showing us women and giving them ideas about freedom and letting them be themselves. Who was okay with that? I wasn't okay with that. I didn't write off on that.
That's Mirror Shashank talking right now.
Yeah.
No. The best thing about this episode is that if you want to sum it up, the story is two strong women lifting each other up through a moment of vulnerability. That's what this episode is. If you take away all the fancy sci-fi stuff and take away the fact that Poe is probably one of the most brilliant women in the galaxy because of what she invented, just because she was bored and wanted to do something for her sister, you take all that away, it's two women finding strength and comfort and grace and a way to lift each other up. That was the best part of the episode. But going to the larger part of the story, if you guys remember, the episode was sold as kind of a horror episode. Like even the previews that we saw, it was that light flickering scene within the cafeteria, and everybody was sold as this is going to be a monstrous, maybe scary, maybe creepy episode. But it turned out to be something a lot more powerful. It turned out to be an episode in which two beings find in spite of being complete strangers, find strength in communication. There are so many layers to it. Even if it's clearly about what it means to be a woman and how you help each other and what it means to find strength even in a stranger. But out of that, it's about beings communicating, and it's about strangers accepting each other. And as someone who runs into strangers every day, who might find him uncomfortable at first because of his color or his accent, I found great strength in Tilly. She went in the pilot episode from the real pilot episode from not even talking to Burnham, letting her sit next to her, to now having a picture of her on her desk. I don't know if you noticed that. And,
I did.
it's clear that strength that Burnham had and what Burnham is as a woman and as such a powerful Starfleet person, that has rubbed off so much on Tilly. Now she's not only coming out of her shell, she's lifting other people up. That was that character arc is beautiful to watch. So many things to unpack here, but no, I don't get the negative feedback. And there is something I've already come to terms with. People are just going to be negative about Discovery. Nobody will sit down and recognize that it clearly had the best season one of all Star Trek shows. Nobody will recognize that the fact that they could pull this off and in spite of the negative feedback, bring joy to tens of millions of people in the world, they're just going to cling to that age old, that rusting sense of fandom. And I'm happy leaving them behind just to enjoy beautiful work like this.
Yeah, I think I'm in that boat where for me, I just the technical stuff doesn't bother me. I did not pay attention to any of the quote unquote loopholes in this about, well, how did Poe get on the ship in the first place and where did they beam Poe off to, and anything else. It's the focus on this is the story and the connection between these two characters, and it's pretty much 1,000% Star Trek in every meaning of those two words. And so, aside from it being a Star Trek story, in these 15 minutes, being something that resonates with me so much as a woman, and having this opportunity to see two women meet on grounds where they don't know one another. And I think one of the standout moments for me was in that first meeting where, and we'll skip ahead. I do want to mention Tilly's conversation with her mother, but when Tilly first meets Poe, and there's kind of they don't have the communicator going quite yet, and Poe kind of like raises up her spikes or whatever they are and hisses at Tilly, and then Tilly like hisses right back.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that moment because that is so reminiscent of Tilly in oh gosh, what's the third one? Context is for Kings, where they're on the Glen, and immediately like she starts taking action and she confronts the Klingon or the stranger in the shadows who turns out to be that Klingon that gets eaten by the tardigrade. Like we already have an established it's already been established that Tilly can certainly step up to the plate and take control and confront fear when it's there, and this just was such a perfect reiteration of that I absolutely loved it. Allie, it sounds like you had a similar reaction.
Yeah, I know in the beginning when Tilly's talking to her mother tells the story of when she was little and all of her classmates were trying to climb a wall and then she couldn't make it up, so she ran away. And obviously that's the runaway isn't just Poe as the title,
Right.
it's also Tilly.
Right.
But I agree with you in the fact that she maybe before when she was younger that she wanted to run away from her challenges, but now we see her stepping into that role where she just, something happens and she takes action, because with Poe, it's up to her. There's no one else. She needs to decide what she's going to do or how she's going to help Poe or if she's going to help Poe. So she needs to make those decisions herself. So in general, everything that happens in the episode just reiterates to Tilly in the end that she realizes, oh, maybe I am ready for the command training program. Maybe I will make it through this because I made those decisions that I need to make and I helped Poe. So I think it all comes full circle in the end.
It's also very cool that both of them are having family trouble. That Tilly is trying to please her mother or trying to get out of that shadow. And she's trying to overcome her conflict with her family. And then Poe is trying to overcome her conflict with her family, except Poe's family is an entire planet.
So did anyone else get like Loxana Troy vibes? Like, I don't know. There was something about Tilly and her mother that just reminded me of Deanna and Loxana.
Mm-hmm. I definitely got that.
And
I did too, for the record.
I did look up. I finally found the IMDb for this episode, and it turns out that Tilly's mom actually has a name, and I'm going to be so okay. Her name, which I've in my previous life experiences have understood it being pronounced as Sivan, and that may not be correct. But I was just really excited that her mother has a name. So this is terrible. I'm going to spell it. It's Siobhan. Does anyone have better? I mean,
Siobhan?
Or yeah, or Siobhan. I think
Yeah,
it's an Irish name.
I've heard it as
Uh,
like a Siobhan type thing. I've had friends before, and their names have been spelled slightly different, but my understanding is that the name pronounced is more like a Siobhan or a Saban or something similar. I'm just really excited that her mom actually has a name.
Speaking
Yeah.
of mom and being Irish, I love that even after going into all these centuries and going away from Earth as we know it and being in such a beautiful futuristic society, white women will be white women. Because I love that coffee connection where she's like, coffee's my best friend. Shush.
Oh God.
The mystical connection between coffee and white women just keeps getting more fascinating to me.
I don't know what it is, but it's a reality. And I mean that I think everyone enjoys the comedic aspect of Mary Wiseman and of Sylvia Tilly's character. And this episode certainly played on it. And to me it felt completely natural between, the conversation with the replicator, her relationship with coffee, which I very much understand being a white woman myself, and her relationship with her mother. I love my mother. I get very similar, not quite as severe as her vibes are, but I understand that relationship. And then hormonal space rabbits or whatnot, which I've heard reactions to that was forced or that was too much, and to me that's right on par with who Tilly is. It fit right in, and I absolutely adored it. There have been a lot of comparisons to Tilly as Barclay, or Tilly is this character or that character. And to me, Tilly is absolutely a character of her own. She's something really special, and I find more and more that people just adore her and or resonate with her. And so to me, like the humor was dead on in this episode without distracting too much from the plot, the mini plot.
hmm I think part of it is that or myself, I can see a lot of myself in Tilly.
Yeah.
And not that I couldn't see myself in other characters, because I do, but just sometimes the things that Tilly says, or the way that sometimes she's just so open about things, I'm like, wow, I would definitely say that. Like the espresso, I release you. Like, I would definitely do that. So I think I definitely see myself a lot in her. So that's why I, resonate with her on such a high level.
Yeah.
I think the real reason why a lot of people uh, find some way to disengage with Discovery is because they cannot accept the fact that these are the most humanized characters in Star Trek we have seen. Yes, we have Kirk, yes, we have Picard, but we don't see those people every day. What we do see every day are people like Tilly, because we see ourselves in them. And
Yeah.
I, for one, I'm not even 1% as handsome as Shazad Latif, but as a character, I can see myself in him. And when Laurel screams, I can just imagine my mother doing that at me. There are so many deep connections here that people keep rejecting Discovery for, and that's another thing that's not the show's fault. The show is truly doing something that Star Trek always aspired to do. All the characters that are on the show up until this point have been people we look up to and people who are more or less 95% perfect or
Mhm.
85% perfect. People in Discovery are really flawed.
Yeah.
They're characters that we find in each other, and that's why there is something so beautiful about them, like the hormonal space rabbit, or when keeps disappearing in the room. Tilly yells at her and says, "Hey, get back here, young lady!" And then she says, "Oh my God, I'm turning into my mother." You know, that those are things that people do. Real people do that.
It really is. And for me, like tangent, but for me, all of these characters, and Broken Record too, like all of these characters are the Spock. Like they're all relatable to me. I can find myself in each of them in some way. And that's why Discovery resonates so strongly with me, is that it's not just, oh, here's this one character that I understand. It's, oh, I can see myself in Saru. I can see myself in Tilly. I can see myself in Burnham. I don't know if I can see myself in Lorca. I could see myself dating Lorca.
Same here.
but but they're definitely like all
Oh,
on
Lorca, that bad boy.
that. They're all on that level of, at least for me, I can identify with them all. Like they're all the misfits in some way, and that's a reason that I love Discovery so much. So we get Poe, and I don't know a lot about the actress Yadira Guarava Prip. I tried to look a little bit about her ethnicity because she is a woman of color, and specifically because I felt like there was a Hawaiian influence on the character. Like her name, Mehani Ikahali Kapo, like that sounds, it's very Hawaiian influenced to me anyway. And so we know so little about this minisode at all that we don't, at least I haven't been able to find any indication of the influence on how these aliens were created. As we know, the Zahians were born with the planet, which makes no sense to me, and apparently made no sense to Tilly, but it makes sense to Poe, and that's what's important there. But also the fact that her blood, like Poe's blood, or assumed blood, looked like lava.
It did kind of. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
was like,
great opportunity for the Star Trek folk to make it a one-shot comic. The origin of Poe. How did she get there? For everybody who has questions and everybody who wants to see how a woman can have a planet as a twin and what that planet looks like, if we don't ever actually go to Zahia. For those unfamiliar, one-shot comics are something that they did. The most recent example is a Star Trek Discovery Annual, in which you find out more about the love story between uh, our favorite couple on Discovery, Stamets and Culber, and it's a 20 to 25 page comic, which is a self-told story in itself, much like short tracks, and it's a really good opportunity for them to do a comic about it. Shows what that world looks like, shows how these characters came to be. Just it's nice to see that they're building more ground for themselves to tell more interesting stories. I want to see where Poe came from.
yeah, I want to see Poe come back, and I know that there's been some discussion of like, well, where did she transport to? I don't know. I assume she went somewhere. I don't care. Like, frankly, I just don't care. They have 15 minutes to make a story, and again, to me, the meat of the story was not, where she went, where she came from. It's about the connection between these two characters. But I would love to just talk to everyone that was involved in writing this episode, because to me, I'm curious of the influence in how they created the Zahians themselves, and having an alien race that is so connected to their planet that they identify with it as their twin sister. Like that's probably the only, like, and it's not even negative. It's just I was like, okay, like I that's it's not something that I can connect with because that's not what happens with planet Earth, of course. Um, but at the same time, I feel like having a close relationship with the planet, like with many of our indigenous cultures and whatnot, that it may lean on that a little bit, but I definitely connected with her passion, to be invested in her planet and help figure out the future of her planet, because as we found out, she will be queen of her planet, which I've heard is tropey, but I'm sorry. Like, it fascinated me that here we have a 17-year-old who we don't know much about, who, okay, was born with her planet. And then we find out that her family's gone, her family's dead, and now she's meant to be queen of her planet and inherit it, on top of being an extremely intelligent scientist. I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to curse because we're not allowed to curse on this network, but holy shoot. Like, it's not tropey to me because, like, these are women that I dream of. Women that are smart, women that are in powerful positions. Like, it even takes me back to, like, Disney's Moana. Like, hopefully, y'all have seen Moana out there. Um,
Yes.
but Moana is essentially a princess of her Polynesian island and her people, And so she's in line to, become like the chief, the queen of her people. And it was very, very similar, where you have just an extremely intelligent woman opposite another extremely intelligent woman who's, poised to take on this extremely powerful position, and she's just not quite ready yet. And to me, that's not tropey. And I don't know, Allie, how do you feel about this? Did you connect with it? Did you feel this was tropey?
I don't know. I don't really think so. Part of, I guess, where I feel in tandem with you is the first time we see Poe, just like when we were seeing the trailers, it brought like, oh, it's going to be a horror. And when we first see Poe, she seems almost like primal when she comes out of that little storage cube that she's in and making all those like noises. But then obviously we come to see that she is remarkable. Her intellect is amazing, and she's built this dilithium incubator for her planet. So I don't know. I feel how you feel, because some people are like, well, of course they're going to do it like that because she's going to be the queen and blah, blah, blah. But also I think, like you said, it's just a testament that to strong women, and strong women can be smart women, and strong women can do whatever they want, and they are capable of taking positions in power and capable of being commanders and captains. And it's just kind of been that string that we see, especially in Discovery, of women taking power.
Yeah. And women like struggling with the responsibility of that kind of power. I mean, with Tilly's experience, like we knew very early on that she wanted to be a captain someday. In fact, I often say on podcasts and in real life, oh, hey, something you don't know about me is I take the words right out of Tilly's mouth. And that thing for Tilly was that she wanted to be captain. And her arc has basically been putting her on that path to where now she's in the command program. And along with that picture of her in Burnham was her medal that she got at the end of season 1 of Discovery, that's framed by her desk. And so she's on her way to the command program. And as we know, with the conversation with her mother, and her mother being a mother, and almost like discouraging her from going into this command program. And so her mother's putting doubts in her own head as to what you want to do. And so by the time Tilly meets Poe, she's in this kind of chaotic place of struggle. Like, am I making a mistake in doing this? And so Poe comes along just at the right time. And again, forgive me, but I don't care about what happens in the background. I just care about what happens with these characters. And so I know there's been contemplation over the Zahians and Poe, and going from kind of that animalistic state into, oh, here's the universal translator. Now we can hear her talk, and now she's more of a person than an animal. And to me, it's just that, okay, she's connected with Tilly, and she's realized that I don't need to scare her. I'm in a place that's relatively safe as far as I can tell, and I can communicate with this person, right? I mean, that's really the barrier that we see in most places, is that you can't communicate with someone. So once they're on that common ground, then they start to bond.
Yeah.
Well, to Poe, I also think as a character, Tilly's the big sister she never had. She looks at Tilly, and she sees someone who's clearly having a lot of the same doubts that she's having, dealing with a lot of the problems that she's dealing with, and they have that playful relationship too. The way they rip off of each other, and the way they communicate is it's also people just don't give enough credit to Discovery, especially for all the comedy, but that comedy is also what draws some people in. Like, if I want to, I don't think there'll ever be a funnier scene than Tilly sitting in the captain's chair in the mirror universe and saying, "What the heck, hell, hold your horses!" Like, there'll never be a funnier scene in Star Trek. They can try, but they'll never get close. And to go back to that planet and sister relationship, I think it's more like in what we see in Avatar, if you do remember that movie, in which people are connected. There is a lot of pagan overtone there, And I think that's rightly done. We've always seen ancient cultures in Star Trek. This was no exception. I like that it also is a way, in a way, a metaphor for Earth and the things we are doing to our planet. When Tilly says, "Hey, do you realize what they'll do if you're not there? They'll destroy that planet just so they can get warp." Isn't that very much in line with what we are doing when we propose things like quote unquote Space Force while we destroy our planet, and we keep trying to leave the planet that we're in and find another home instead of making our planet better? Again, so many similarities to Earth and cultures of old, if you will, with where Poe is coming from, to me at least.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me, that's what Star Trek has always been about. I mean, we have all these fantastical stories in space of all these amazing things that happen. And in the end, though, it's not so much about, oh, that's cool that they met a new alien race. It all brings it back to really relevant cultural events, morality, everything that's happening today. And that's what I think Discovery does so well, especially with some of these, comedic elements and these characters that we can really identify with. It really brings it right back into the forefront of, yes, Star Trek is a story set in space, but it's also about us, humanity, about who we are as a people. And with that, I'm actually going to ask you guys a question, because I actually thought that Poe kind of mirrored Jayla. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I kind of got that from watching it. I don't know. How do you feel?
I can see that. I mean, obviously, we get Jayla in what, 2 hours of a film versus a sneak peek at someone. But I will put it this way. I mean, Jayla, I think, is a character that we need to see more of in Star Trek, especially because she was extremely independent. She was not afraid to speak her mind. She was a very attractive personality to me, but not in like, let's put her in a cat suit type of attractiveness. It was the fact that she was spunky and adorable and had all of these elements without being sexualized, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
in
She's
all
a tomboy.
yeah, but she was still like, there was still just something extra about her. And I do find that similarity with Poe in that it's in a different way. And I think it's something that has to do with having women characters that are not what we're used to in the Star Trek franchise. And what I say by that we're used to, I mean, again, this is a glimpse. Like Jayla was a glimpse at a character, but this is a character that stands alone on her own 2 feet, doesn't need any other character storyline. Although I did enjoy her relationship with Scotty, but she really stands alone as an empowered woman character in Star Trek. And even in these 15 minutes, I get the same thing with Poe, because some of the things that come out of Poe's mouth that I wrote down. Now, one of these was Tilly's remark to Poe that Poe is the evolution. Like it's not her planet, it's Poe. And that is just such an extremely empowering thing to hear, especially from another woman. That just resonated so strongly to me because, like you said, Shashank, it's one woman uplifting another woman by saying, no, you need to recognize that you are what's special here. And then outside of that, Poe even said when she was talking about, developing this technology and everything, that she was being extraordinary. And again, to hear women in Star Trek make these claims and say these very powerful statements about themselves, we don't get a lot of that in this way from Star Trek. I mean, sure, we've had really great women representation throughout the 52-year history of Trek, but along with that representation has also come a lot of sexism, which, I don't want to go into a whole tangent about that, but in some respects, it not that it downplays, but you have trouble feeling that some of these characters are especially on top. I think that characters like Janeway and even B'Elanna, basically the women of Voyager especially, I think stick out more, as far as being empowered women without being tethered or downplayed or written over in certain ways. And even DS9, I guess our later years of Star Trek. But to have women just making statements like these, and again in an episode that had no ties to men whatsoever, that's why this little short trek resonates so strongly with me, is that I feel like finally women in Trek are getting like a true representation of we can be intelligent, assertive, powerful, strong women without ties to anyone else. And we can do this while helping each other out. I will leave it at that, and then I will let Shashank chime in.
Uh, to answer your question, Ali, I do see that similarity in them. The two strongest similarities that stand out to me between Jayla and Poe are one, that both of them do not care about quote unquote looking pretty. They're not interested in attracting a male or getting some kind of attention that has to do with their body. They're both characters that are themselves, and that's the to me as a man, those are the sexiest women who just don't care and they're happy being themselves, and that is more important to them than trying to find a man. So it's great that they're both they were even. The best part is in Runaway, the fact that she does not care about looking a certain way is what throws us off as viewers, because at the end, when it's revealed that she's a queen, you've never seen a queen that looks that way because you're so used to being spoon fed a certain kind of queen when you see shows or movies. And the second one is they're clearly both very mechanical, handsy women, which is just more empowerment for women in STEM. Jayla fixes an entire ship by herself. And in this episode, Poe is revealed to have built an incubator that could revolutionize space science. So just a lot of strong similarities there for me, for sure.
Yeah, good. I'm glad I wasn't the only one that thought that way, because I was like, well, I don't know if I should let you guys know that I felt that way, because then otherwise, oh, I'm the only one that thinks that.
No.
But yeah, I agree. I think that, also with Poe, her motivation for her planet, and not so much with Jayla. I mean, her motivation is to get off the planet. For Jayla, it's a little bit different, but I just think that they both have such like fiery souls and are so, they are so determined that what they need to do is true to them. And I definitely just saw that come across in Runaway. It was kind of just like jumped out at me right away. I was like, oh, I see that.
It really makes me hope that we see more of Poe later on, which, I mean, who's to say if we will? I hope that we see the Zahians again. But it just reinforces like why, at least for me and for me as a woman, like this episode was just so extremely powerful. We get scenes throughout TNG, Voyager, DS9, not really with Enterprise. I think people that know me know I'm just not a fan of the way that Enterprise portrayed women. I think that both Hoshi and T'Pol, like I think T'Pol was done better, but poor Hoshi I think deserved a lot more than she got, and I don't think making her the Empress in the Mirror episode did it. Sorry guys, but there are scenes between like Jadzia and Kira and DS9, or B'Elanna and Janeway and Voyager, where I feel like they pass the Bechdel test. We get examples of women being strong women without any attachment to men at all. And I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but I'm sorry to any men that this offends. I hope you can rise above any offense to understand what we're talking about here.
No, we cannot. When you go high, we go low.
Otherwise, sorry, you're not going to like my podcast. Bye. I'm just kind of done. But there's just something really special about this. And I guess, while I can understand where people aren't connecting with it because of technical issues, like, please take a step back and ditch whatever preconceptions you're attaching and just consider what an episode like this means for people like me. And there's just something very special coming at a time in our country, and in the world, where I think women are struggling a lot, and where I'm struggling personally. Like, having this story, seeing these two powerful women connect and uplift each other, was just something that I needed. And
Yeah.
uh, like, I couldn't have asked for a better example of a first short trek. As I always do, I pulled out a quote, and I pulled out the quote specifically because I was having a conversation, when I was recording Queer Trek the other week, or this week, I guess, and it just something that came up. And so the quote was from Tilly. She was talking to Poe about, when the people who are supposed to care about you don't listen to you, it's frightening and it's lonely. It makes you feel like you're crazy, or like you're not even there. And I get that. And again, like, this is just an example of, Star Trek being Star Trek and reaching out to all of us, because I think that a lot of times, we feel like people that should be there to support us aren't necessarily supporting us, and that we often feel alone. And this all just drives back to the, oh, is Tilly the Spock? Is Tilly the Barclay? And to me, all these characters, they meet similar expectations as to what the Spock character did for Star Trek. But that came up, and it was something that was pertinent to a discussion that we'd had on Queer Trek, and I feel like it just probably resonated to a lot of people, or with a lot of people, and a lot of people who resonate with Tilly's character, because even when we are, strong, assertive people, we're still vulnerable. And I think that's another big part of this episode, was exploring vulnerability, and being there for each other in those times of vulnerability. So I don't know if that resonated with you guys at all much.
Yeah.
Ali, I'll let you get deep into that thought, but there is just one thing I want to say, because I don't think there is anything I can say about the woman aspect that'll be stronger than what you two say. But anybody who's trying to cling to those technicalities, we are seeing a show about people on a spaceship that travels faster than the speed of light. Calm down.
I try to remind people, like, this is science fiction, right? Uh, it's a science fiction show. And again, like, we come back to, it's 15 minutes. So I have found that going into these things with no expectations leads me to just enjoy what's there. But in general, like, that's just me. I'm not super critical about every finite detail of a universe. But anyway, Allie, give us your thoughts, please, and thank you.
Yeah. Coming back to what you were saying about it's okay for women to be vulnerable. And I think that this is something in multiple Star Trek that I've seen, but very much so in Discovery. We get this idea of a strong woman is not allowed to be sad, or is not allowed to have a moment of weakness. She must always be strong and never let anything bother her. And that's something, even growing up, where it's like, well, okay, you get hurt on the playground and you can't cry. You don't want to cry because you want to seem stronger to everyone else, or you're having trouble, but you can't tell everyone else that you're not okay because that makes you look weak. And that is something that obviously is completely wrong. It happens to everyone. Everyone has those moments, and it's okay. And with Tilly, obviously talking to her mother, and she's like, well, are you sure you want to do this? Because when you were younger, you couldn't do it then. So who's to say you can do it now? And obviously Tilly screaming into her pillow. Mm-hmm. She's having a lot of frustration with that. But same with, when we first see Poe, and she's like, what am I supposed to do? I've built this incredible dilithium incubator, but no one cares on my planet. Everyone is so greedy. It doesn't matter. And in the end, Tilly is talking to her about, well, what do you think you should do, and what's going to fix it? Who's going to take care of your planet if you're not there? Who's going to do who's going to take charge. And Poe gets her answer there, that she needs to be the one. But, leading up to that, it was I need that time to process. I need that time to have a moment of weakness, and that's okay. I just think so many people assume that it's not okay for women to have those moments, when in reality, when women have those moments, they come back stronger than ever before. That's just what I think.
And there's like a reaffirmation that regardless of sex or gender identity, like, you are valid in being you.
Absolutely.
And, again, like with the story of Moana, like, she again, like, she's called to do a certain thing. She's called to be a voyager and to go out and basically fix her planet because her island is dying. And so there's a similarity there where, Poe is doing something that's going to help sustain her planet in the long run. And yeah, it's not something that her people really understand or support or get. But this storyline is very much a way of saying, no, you need to follow who you are, embrace who you are and your talents and what you can do, and really come into that. And so I assume that Poe gets beamed somewhere and she winds up back on her planet, and maybe in the future we'll see her as queen of her planet of Zahia. But that's it's a powerful statement to say, no, you're valid in being you, and you're valid in being an intelligent person who's finding solutions on how to help your planet and your people, regardless of what anyone else says. And again, this is just one where it's like the downside is that, yeah, it's 15 minutes and it's there and it's over, and you're like, oh, but I want more.
But then when we're left wanting more, it shows that it did a good job.
Yeah, and
and for all those men who have suffered through this estrogen-fueled fairy tale, I have good news for all of you. The next 3 short treks are all about men.
Yeah,
it's going to be a dude, an alien dude, and a crazy woman slaver dude. Those are your 3 short treks. Way to go, man! We did it.
It's true. So, like, let us have our moment, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shashank. Thank you. Thank you. I hope that with at least Saru's episode, we get to like meet some women Kelpian on the planet, but Kelpians. So we'll see. But yeah, I just thought that this was a very beautiful story, and I've watched it 3 times, almost back to back, and I love it every time. I love Mary Wiseman. I love Tilly. I love Poe. I love what Yadira Gurava brought to this character. I hope we see more of her. I thought it was a great episode. I think there are some small things like questions onto whether the replicator and the replicator's craziness was perhaps a nod to Impractical Jokers from the animated series. Yeah, shout out to Aaron Harvey over at Trek FM Saturday morning. Or oh crap, I said that wrong. It's the TAS podcast that he does, Saturday Morning Trek, I think is what it's called. Sorry, Aaron, you don't listen to this, so it doesn't matter. But he had posted like a side by side with like screenshots from Impractical Joker and then screenshots from this short trek. Given the various references to TAS and Discovery, I kind of want to believe it was meant to be a nod. If not, it's still a cool little thing to see the replicator going super crazy. Some people commented that, yay, the computer whose voice is played by Julianne Grossman is also a woman. And I'm not quite sure that helps with Bechdel-Wallace test passing, but it's still, of course, yes, great to have a woman computer voice. So props there. And I think we're all enchanted with the sassiness of Discovery's computer.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, adding to that, The short trek was written in part by a woman, Jenny Lumet, along with Alex Kurtzman, and then also directed by a woman as well. So
yes, it was. We have Maja. Okay, Vervilo. I hope that's right. I'm sorry. I will totally take responsibility for my whiteness and possibly mispronouncing that. Yeah, and then Jenny Lumet, she wrote the 2017 Mummy, which I've not seen.
You're better off.
Okay.
Nobody should see that.
I'm going to say that this was better because I've also not seen Rachel Getting Married with Anne Hathaway, which was like popping up on Netflix forever, and I never watched it because no thanks. But, sorry people that didn't like this short trek. I thought it was amazing. Allie thinks it's amazing. Shashank seems to really like it, and he's a dude. So, like.
Last I checked.
Okay, I think part of it is, though, like you guys have both been highlighting, is that some people, they don't even take time to enjoy what's happening in the episode. They just try to find something wrong with it. It's like that's their goal, is like, okay, I'm going to watch this and I have to find the one thing that doesn't fit. And then that obviously takes away from everything that you're supposed to get out of it. So in the end, they don't even realize what the episode was meant to be about. It was just about finding that one flaw.
Well, I think it's also important for everybody listening to remember that Star Trek Discovery is really the first show that exists in the midst of all this online fandom. Like before this, it was all people watching it in their own homes and then coming to places to talk about it. But now everybody has an immediate place to type out 280 characters worth of criticism. So it's much easier for those things to be magnified. But the fact that if you just think about it, it's really made on a shoestring budget. It's two people. There are probably three sets, and really one of them is the main set, which is Tilly's room, and then there is the cafeteria, and then the transporter room, and really very, very little special effects. And they still managed to make such a big impression with this. It's just another negative thing that Discovery has managed to take down. People said, "Oh, Discovery will never succeed." It succeeded with flying colors. Now has season 2 on the way, and
What?
people said. And people said short treks, that's never going to work. They managed to show that not only can Tilly carry a short treks, she's very much worthy of doing like frame of mind styled one woman show episodes where it's a character exploration into her, and it's just people proving their worth over and over again in spite of all these communities coming out against Discovery.
Yeah. I mean, I got to be clear. Like, I don't want to be like gatekeeper. Like, if you don't like this episode of Short Treks, you're not a Star Trek fan or anything like that. I just really encourage
You're such
people.
an SJW, Heather.
Oh my God. Well, I am. I'm like the SJW gate. I'm like the gatekeeper of gatekeepers, apparently, is what I've been told. But regardless, like, just kind of drop everything else, and try to watch it from the perspective that we've given and the insight that we've given and what it means for women. Discovery has done a really great job of providing representation for women. And again, I think I started to mention this at the beginning of the episode. Like, I'm on the verge of saying, is this the best representation of women characters that we've gotten? And I can't even answer that question. I feel like I need to see a bit more, especially with Laurel, and see where she goes. But on a base level, I feel like we've gotten perhaps the most fair representation of women where they are not constantly tied to a male character or mind raped or otherwise
Impregnated with light.
used as a plot device.
Well, to answer your
etc.
question, if I can weigh in on that one,
Sure.
the show starts off with arguably one of the best captains we've seen, one of the coolest and just really funny, very, very inspiring captains who happens to be a female. The show has in its main cast a woman who's an introvert, a woman who's trying to get over the power chain in spite of being in a species that keeps saying it honors honor, but does not give women the chance they need. And then at the center of the entire show is an ex-convict who's given a second chance at life and is making the best of it. I don't know if there is a better representation of women in Star Trek. And if I was to answer your question, I would think yes. This definitely is the most accurate, most powerful representation of women, real women that I know and live in a world with in Star Trek.
Yeah,
Nice.
I absolutely concur, like 100%.
I know there's been struggle, and it was, one of the downsides of the, with the way that we do DiscoTrek, and we've always opened it up to community, and we kind of randomly pick who's going to be in the episode. So I can't say, oh, we're doing an episode about Captain Georgiou, so we need to have Jeff and I and two women or something like that. Like we don't choose that way. So we were going to have a woman on that episode, and unfortunately she couldn't make it, so we lost that bit of perspective. And that's why I think it's just super important to always have that representation on the podcast that we do. The difficult thing with Georgiou and Landry is that they were, two of our women of color. Michelle Yeoh being one of the prominent actresses that was shown in previews for Discovery, who gets killed in the second episode. And yes, she gets brought back, thank goodness. So I don't know. I'm not a woman of color. I'm a white woman. So I can't make some exclamation that redeemed her death as a person of color in the second episode. And again, this is a short trek, and we don't know whether we're going to see Poe or not in the future. But I still found it valuable that she was there. And I hope that we'll see her again in some way. But I just wanted to reiterate that I did find value in that representation and having an alien species that wasn't just some kind of white ripoff, if that makes sense, or some other iteration of a white character. It's important to have that representation because it's sure they might bring you back, but the trauma of seeing yourself and I mean, I can at least speak for the queer community, like seeing yourself represented in Star Trek and then seeing your character slowly killed off really sucks. And then, okay, I should have just been able to been on the Georgiou episode to give my thoughts there. Tangent, but still, I was really happy to see a woman of color on this episode. And I think that plays into what Star Trek Discovery is doing for women in general and making sure that we're represented in a variety of ways. So we're just missing trans women. So I hope that you find a way to bring them on in the future, although no one from Discovery listens to our podcast. So we'll see. None of the writers anyway.
That would be really exciting.
There's so much opportunity. And I know it seems like right now, as we're going into season 2, we all know there's been a bit of a shakeup with the writing staff and who's involved. And at this point, outside of Alex Kurtzman, like I'm not quite sure what's happening with season 2. It looks like Ted Sullivan is also out on the heels of Gretchen Berg and what's Aaron Harbert's that were both dismissed. I know Akiva Goldsman's working over on the Picard series now, and Kirsten Beyer is there too. But I'm not quite sure if like Boyoung Kim or Erica Leopold are still working on Discovery. I'm not quite sure what's going on. So I'm curious to see what happens in season 2. But super excited to see number 1 for sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. She's one of my absolute favorites.
Yes. You cosplay as her.
I did. And I plan to do so again.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we've covered about anything. Were there any final notes that either of you wanted to make about Runaway? Anything that we didn't touch? Shashank, any last thoughts here?
Just stop gatekeeping, stop fighting over the woman having this one. For everybody who has listened and has suffered through this, oh, captains, our male captains, our journey, our fearful journey has come to an end. We've given women 15 minutes. We have 45 minutes worth of male stuff coming. Just calm down, enjoy this very well written story, and stop complaining. Just seriously stop complaining about women being on shows. They're going to take over. You just should be okay with it. God knows it's been overdue. And just coming to the specifics of the episode, it's a very well written episode, and it shows to me that Mary Wiseman does not need to be kept on the sidelines. I'm not saying she was in Discovery. I certainly would have liked to seen more of her. I'm not complaining again. I understand the way the stories went, but maybe give her that one woman episode that she deserves. She
Or
clearly
a
has done
book.
a great job.
She
Or
has
a
a book.
book.
Yes,
Mhm.
the
Or a
Una McCormick's book. I think Beyond the Farthest Star, I think is what it's called. I have it
Mhm.
pre-ordered, and it is a discovery novel focused on Tilly. And that comes out, I believe, at this point it's 2019, though I'm not completely sure. But at least we get a book.
that still I would still like to see, a like I said, a one woman episode in which I get to see Tilly like confront her biggest fears of like speaking to people and holding on to going to that lowest place where she's faced with everything and come out on top and make a statement about, introverted women, that it's okay to be shy, it's okay to be nervous, you'll make it through. I just hope they continue doing that and giving her more power.
I have faith. I think we will probably see that. Allie, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Um, I would say to anyone that's, some people were very lukewarm about it. I would say watch it again, because I got something different out of it each of the 4 or 5 times that I watched it. And it's the same with Discovery. I almost enjoyed it more the second time than I did the first. I mean, I liked it the first time as well, but um, and to those who say they won't watch it, well, how do you know if you don't like it if you don't watch it? I just think it's truly was an incredible story about women, and one that didn't require, like Shashank said, a lot of special effects or crazy things going on to do it. It was just two women that didn't know each other, that bonded over their commonalities, and then they both ended up the better for it. So I think it's truly just a great Star Trek story, and one that we definitely need more of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when I came back from STLV this past year, one of the things that resonated with me the most was reflecting on my relationship in the Star Trek community with other women and how we work together to empower one another and support one another. And I'm holding a pen right now that was inspired by our DiscoTrek deep dive of Laurel, which had Sam from Trekkie Girls and Annika Dane, and Annika pinned Laurel as the social justice Klingon warrior princess. And so now I have the pin in my hand representing that. And as a woman that's been through a lot in the past year, and as I alluded to earlier, some of what's going on in the world is just forcing me to confront some situations where I have been taken advantage of and frankly abused as a woman. It is, like I said, it's been very difficult for me to be excited about even things like Star Trek right now. And anyone who knows me would likely be very, very shocked by that because, in the past year, Star Trek has Star Trek, the Star Trek community has literally saved my life. So to be in a place where I'm struggling to find connection has been very difficult. And just to be completely honest, it's why I wasn't on the Captain Giorgio episode, is I just mentally and emotionally was not there. A friend of mine made sure that I watched this short trek, and this short trek was exactly what I needed. And I just want people to truly understand that even a 15-minute episode, even something where you don't see the value, for me, has reinvigorated and just motivated me to come back and use my voice and talk about things that I love. So then and there, I just want people to realize that even if you don't like a thing, it still matters to someone else. And so I hope that from this podcast, people will maybe go back and revisit the short trek. And again, I'm not trying to invalidate men in any way or say that because you're a man, you can't understand this or you won't understand this. I just want to emphasize that your experience may be different from mine and to try to urge others to see it from this angle. And that this story specifically is something that at least I found I really needed. And it sounds like the two of you also very much enjoyed it and support it. And Allie is another woman. It resonated strongly with you. And I just hope that this encourages people to look at it from that perspective and hopefully get a little bit more value out of it. You don't have to change your opinion, but I'm just really big on opening eyes and encouraging people to look at things from various perspectives. But I'm grateful to have had this episode. So thank you to Star Trek Discovery, and thank you to Allie and to Shashank for joining me and talking about this. I didn't think I was going to get the chance, so I'm really excited that it worked out this way. Allie, we will have to have you back.
Oh, I'd be
Oh,
delighted
yeah.
then.
Ali is definitely coming back. I don't know about DiscoTrek, but we have a couple of things in the works. I'm going to make a family member out of Ali. It's going to happen.
Well, Tricorder has like 10 shows or something right now. So, yes, we now have, okay, so we may cut this out. We have Polyester who has created a new show and that will debut later this month. So with Marina and I have 3 women. We are always open to having 4 women on this network. So, Allie, if you ever have an idea for a podcast or show, just let us know. But in the meantime, there are numerous shows. I don't think you've been on a Trek Ranks yet.
I have not.
So we
this
need
is
to,
our first podcast. So
yeah, we need to get you on Trek Ranks. We need to get you everywhere. So we will most certainly have you back. In the meantime, I know who you are online, but do you want to let people know how to find you online if they'd like to continue the discussion?
Oh, sure. I would say the platform that I use the most consistently would be Twitter. And on Twitter, you can find me at the @ sign, and it's ttrekkie. I also do have a website, and that's ttrekkie.wordpress.com. And I'm working on getting a YouTube up. It's coming slowly but surely. And like you said, Heather, things in life come up that sometimes prevent us from getting all the things done that we wanted to. But I would definitely reach out on Twitter. That's probably where you'll get the best response from me. Send me a DM if you want. Otherwise, through my Twitter profile, there's some more contact information there as well.
Yep, and make sure to chime in on Tuesdays for Tau Talk Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. I didn't even think. I do this fun, it's only about a 2-minute show on Tuesdays where I, unedited, unfiltered, I'm just got out of the shower, I have a towel in my hair, and I talk about something that is meaningful to me or something that is on my mind for that Tuesday. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. You get a lot of engagement. So it's definitely something to check out. And then Shashank, you're all over the place. So what's the best way to contact you?
Well, people can find me on the Tricorder Network, messing around with a bunch of their shows. I co-host Polytreks with Barry DeFord, my wonderful co-host. We talk politics and culture in the world of Star Trek, and we put them up against politics and culture in the real world. It's a lot of fun. Join us; it gets interesting. I also co-host Weekly Trek, which is exactly that. We talk about what happened in the week in the world of Star Trek in that one show. You'll get to hear about all the important news updates, controversies. We throw out our crazy fan theories, like how I think in the Brightest Star, which is the upcoming Kelpian short, the Predator should be Gorn. Yes, I said that. Go and listen to it. But If you want to reach out to me personally, I love talking Star Trek and comic books and really anything nerdy on @gutter_hero on Twitter. And in the near future, you can find me replacing Jeff on this show, DiscoTrek.
He just snuck that in there.
Hopefully Jeff does not cut that out. Yeah, as the head of the networks here, yeah, Jeff and I have a lot on our plates, and I excused Jeff tonight so that he can handle real life. Not that this isn't real life, but aside.
See, people, that's the advantage of not having a life.
None of us have lives because we make you podcasts. Okay, so for me, I am LLA Posper on Twitter, which is LLAPAWSPER. I tweet a lot about Star Trek, mostly Star Trek, every now and then, also about dogs and sword fighting, because that's what I do. The show is at Disco_Trek. The network is at Tricorder Show. You can find us on both Facebook and the interwebs under either DiscoTrek. The website is the tricordertransmissions.com. And if you are so inclined, we do have a Patreon. Our Patreon is patreon.com/the tricorder transmissions. Anywhere from $1 on up will get you access to our unedited versions of the podcast where you can hear me ramble about how I've lost my train of thought and don't know what I was talking about. And other fun stuff. We sometimes chat before and or after the shows. We also attempt to host monthly meetups where we just shoot the beep beep about Star Trek and talk about whatever you want. And then we also sometimes include supplementals and other Patreon only access episodes. So again, it does not matter how much you donate. It starts at $1. $1 will get you a special Tricorder Show pin. And from then on, we just think you're super awesome. We'll give you a shout out online if you join us via Patreon. Be sure to let us know that you donated on behalf of DiscoTrek.
Before you finish, I do want to say, people engaging with Heather, if you have anything negative to say to her, just don't. She will destroy you.
Please don't. I won't destroy you. I will just mute you and you will scream into the void. I have given up on responding to any negative feedback because I cannot handle it. And if you really want to be an asshole, I will. Oh, we don't cuss on DiscoTrek. If you really want to be a jerk, I will make you feel really poorly for doing that by telling you my life story. Enjoy. In the meantime, we will be back not only to talk about the next short trek, which is Calypso, featuring an all-new character to Star Trek. No idea what to expect out of this short trek. And we'll also be doing a deep dive into Ash Tyler for our next main episode. Until then, live long and prosper, and long live the Empire.